wife asked me to sign a postnuptial agreement at dinner. I had already spoken to her lawyer that morning. She ordered the sea bass, her favorite. The one she only orders when she's celebrating something or when she's nervous. I watched her study the menu she already knew by heart. And I thought, she has no idea. When the appetizers arrived, she reached into her bag slowly, deliberately, and slid a sealed envelope across the white tablecloth toward me. I need you to read something, Michael. It's important, and I need you to keep an open mind. I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at my wife of 16 years, and I said the 7 words that changed everything that happened next. I already spoke to your lawyer this morning. The color left her face, not quickly, slowly, the way light leaves a room at the end of the day. And in that moment, I understood exactly how long she had been planning this, and exactly how close had come to never finding out at all. My name is Michael. I'm 51 years old, and I want to start by telling you something that matters for everything that follows. I am not a suspicious person by nature. I am an architect. I spent my career designing spaces for people to live their lives in homes, schools, community buildings. I believe in the integrity of structures. I believe that if you build something carefully with the right foundation, it holds. I applied that philosophy to my marriage. My wife, Diane, is 48. She's a senior partner at a marketing consultancy, sharp, strategic, and extraordinarily good at understanding what people want before they've said it out loud. I fell in love with her at a mutual friend's dinner party where she spent 20 minutes brilliantly dismantling a terrible business idea someone had proposed, and then turned to me and said, "Sorry, I get passionate. What do you do?" We were married 18 months later. For the first decade, we were a strong team. We bought the house together. We built our careers in parallel. We supported each other through the difficult things. My father's illness, her firm's restructuring. The pregnancy we lost quietly in our second year and never quite talked about enough. We were not a perfect marriage, but we were, I believed, a real one. The shift, looking back, began about 2 years ago. Not dramatically. Marriages rarely break dramatically. They break the way old buildings settle slowly in places you're not watching until one day, a crack appears in the wall that you realize has been forming for years. Diane began working later. This wasn't unusual. Her role had always demanded unpredictable hours, but the quality of her presence changed. She was physically home, but somehow elsewhere. Conversations that used to run long over dinner now wrapped up in 10 minutes. She laughed less at the things that used to make her laugh. I noticed, and I did what many people in long marriages do when they notice. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself she was under pressure at work. I told myself that distance in a marriage was normal and that we would find our way back to each other, because we always had. The first moment I could not explain away came on a Tuesday evening in March. I came home earlier than expected. A client meeting had been canceled, and found Diane in the kitchen on the phone. She had her back to the door and didn't hear me come in. She was speaking in the quiet, measured tone she uses in professional calls. Not her home voice, her work voice, controlled and deliberate. I heard one sentence before she turned and saw me. "He doesn't need to know the timeline yet. Let's just make sure the documentation is clean." She turned, saw me. The call ended. Within 30 seconds. "Work thing," she said. "Sorry. Dinner in 20 minutes. "Sure," I said. I smiled. I set my bag down, but the sentence stayed with me like something caught between my teeth that couldn't dislodge no matter how hard I tried. He doesn't need to know the timeline yet. I want to be honest about what happened. Next, I did not launch into some aggressive investigation. I am not that kind of man, and this is not that kind of story. What I did was far more ordinary and, in retrospect, it's far more effective. I simply started paying attention to the things I had been choosing not to see. Discovery 1, the visual. Clue 3 days after the phone call, Diane left for an early meeting and forgot her reading glasses on the kitchen counter. She called me from the car, asked if I could leave them at her office on my way to a site visit. I said, of course. I found the glasses on her desk in the home office, and next to them, not hidden, not locked away, simply sitting there the way things sit when someone doesn't expect them to be seen, was a yellow legal pad covered in her handwriting. I am not proud of reading it. I want to say that clearly, but I also want to say I read it. It was a list, organized the way Diane organizes everything: columns, categories, annotations, and the margins. One column was labeled assets, joint. One was labeled assets, individual. A third, smaller column at the far right was labeled simply timeline against several items in the joint column. She had written question marks against the items in the individual column. Her pension, portfolio I hadn't known existed, something labeled Elliott account. There were no question marks. Those lines were clean and certain. I left the glasses on the desk. I drove to the site visit. I went through the entire day on autopilot, nodding at the right moments, answering questions professionally, doing everything I was supposed to do while somewhere behind my eyes a slow, cold reckoning was taking shape. Discovery 2, the financial clue. That weekend, Diane went to visit her sister for 2 days. I spent Saturday morning doing something I had not done in the entire 16 years of our marriage. I went through our finances, all of them, not just a joint account. I looked at casually each month, everything: the investment accounts, the property records, the insurance policies, the tax returns from the past 4 years, which our accountant filed and I signed without reading closely enough. It took me 5 hours by early afternoon. I had found 3 things that I could not account for. First, a brokerage account opened 22 months ago in Diane's name alone. I had not been told about it. The balance, based on the most recent statement I found in her filing cabinet, significant, built through consistent monthly contributions that, when I cross-referenced them against our joint savings, corresponded almost exactly to the months our joint savings rate had slowed. Second, a property valuation report for a house, dated 7 months ago, commissioned privately. I had not been told about this either. Third, a single payment, 8 months ago, to a law firm whose name I didn't recognize. Not enormous, but deliberate. It's a kind of payment that initiates a relationship with an attorney. I sat back in my chair, outside. The garden looked the way it always looks on a Saturday, still and green and completely indifferent to what was happening inside the house. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would tell me the truth without managing me, my older brother. Tom is not an attorney. He's a retired civil court judge, which is, in some ways, better. I told him what I had found, all of it: the phone call, the legal pad, the accounts, the valuation, the payment to the law firm. He listened without interrupting, a skill he developed over 30 years on the bench. When I finished, there was a pause. "Mike," he said, "do you have your own attorney for the business?" "Yes." "Call him Monday." Not to do anything, just to have a conversation, to make sure you understand where you stand. "Tom, do you think she's planning to?" "I think," he said carefully, "that someone has been doing a lot of planning. And I think it's time you did some too." Discovery 3, the behavioral clue. I want to tell you about the 2 weeks between finding the legal pad and the dinner, because those 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I was living inside a version of my marriage that I now understood was a performance, and I had to perform within it because I wasn't ready to act. I needed time. I needed information. I needed to understand the full picture before I said a single word of my life. I was living inside a version of my marriage that I now understood was a performance, and I had to perform within it because I wasn't ready to act. I needed time. I needed information. I needed to understand the full picture before I said a single word, so I watched Diane. I noticed had begun separating her personal documents from our shared filing system, subtly, one folder at a time, over several weeks. I only noticed because I went looking for our homeowner's insurance renewal and found a gap where a section of her personal records used to be. I noticed she had started taking her laptop to bed. I noticed she was particularly warm to me in public, at a dinner party we attended, at a friend's birthday gathering, warmer than she'd been privately in months, attentive, touching my arm, laughing at my stories. I understood what that was. It was the behavior of someone who needed the external record of the marriage to look a particular way, and understanding that was, perhaps, the loneliest moment of everything that followed. My attorney.com. It's a precise man named Gregory who had handled my firm's legal matters for 8 years. Met with me on a Thursday morning. I laid everything out for him. He took notes without expression, the way good attorneys do. When I finished, he leaned back and looked at me. The account structure suggests she's been establishing financial independence for nearly 2 years. The property valuation suggests she's been calculating the asset picture, the payment to the law firm. He checked his notes. Hartwell and Associates, corporate litigation and matrimonial law. I know, I said. A postnuptial agreement in this situation, Gregory said, would typically be designed to reframe the asset division in advance of a separation, lock in terms while the other party is unaware of the broader context, presented as a reasonable, protective measure, often framed as being for both parties' benefits. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about that for a moment. Want to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I do anything, I said. Can you reach out to Hartwell's office, professionally, just to establish that I have representation? That I'm aware. Gregory looked at me steadily. That will signal to Diane that you know. I know, I said. I'm ready for that. He made the call that morning. That evening, came home and told me she'd made a reservation at Carano's, our favorite restaurant, for Saturday night. Feel like we need a proper evening out, she said, smiling. Just the two of us. Sounds perfect, I said. I spent the next 48 hours preparing myself, not for a battle, not for a confrontation in the way people imagine confrontations, for a conversation. I'd earned the right to have on my terms, with my eyes open, with everything already known. Carano's on a Saturday night is always beautiful, the kind of place where the light is soft enough to forgive everything and the wine list is long enough to postpone anything. We were seated at the corner table, key the one Diane always requests. She says she likes being able to see the room. I've always understood that about her. She likes knowing where things are. We ordered. We talked about easy things, a renovation project I was finishing, a colleague of hers who'd recently been promoted. The conversation was smooth and practiced, the way long married conversations can be. I watched her. She was dressed beautifully. She'd worn the earrings I gave her for our 10th anniversary. The appetizers arrived, and then her hand moved to her back slowly. The careful movement of someone who has rehearsed this moment. The envelope came out, white, sealed. She placed it beside my bread plate with the precision of someone setting down something fragile. I need you to read something, Michael. It's important. I need you to keep an open mind. I looked at the envelope. I looked at her dot, and the version of this conversation she had prepared for. The one where I opened it with mild confusion, and she walked me through it gently, and I eventually signed something I didn't fully understand. That version ended right there. I already spoke to your lawyer this morning, Cass said. The silence that followed was only a few seconds long, but it was the kind of silence that reorganizes the air in a room. What? Craig recalled Hartwell's office Thursday morning. Professional. Notification that I have representation. Apparently, they found it somewhat surprising. Diane set her fork down. She looked at the envelope, then at me, then at the middle distance, the particular gaze of someone rapidly reassessing a situation. How long have you known? She asked. Not, what are you talking about? Not, this isn't what you think. How long have you known? Long enough, I said. The legal pad on your desk. The brokerage account. The property valuation. Okay. The payment to Hartwell 8 months ago. Each item landed like a stone dropped into still water. Michael, I'm not angry, I said. And the remarkable thing, the thing that surprised even me, was that I meant it. I was not angry. I had moved through the anger 2 weeks ago, alone in my study at 2 in the morning. And what remained now was something quieter and more durable. Then, what are you? She asked. Sad, I said simply. Claire. She looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her face. The professional composure she'd worn all evening, loosening at the edges. I didn't know how to start the conversation, she said. So you started a brokerage account instead. That's not fair, Diane. My voice was quiet, steady. You spent 2 years building a financial position I didn't know about. You had our home valued without telling me. You retained a matrimonial attorney 8 months ago. Tonight, you brought a legal document to a dinner table and presented it as a formality. That is not a person who didn't know how to start a conversation. That is a person who decided their spouse didn't deserve to be part of the conversation at all. She looked down at the tablecloth. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright. I was afraid, she said, of what you'd say, of what it would turn into. I've watched people go through this and lose everything, and I needed to know I'd be okay. I understand that, I said. I genuinely do. Then why does it feel like? Because understanding why someone did something doesn't mean the thing they did was right, I said. You protected yourself by removing me from a decision about my own life, and you almost succeeded. The word almost sat on the table between us. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said, we do this honestly. Full disclosure on both sides. Both sets of attorneys, both complete financial pictures, everything in the open. The way it should have been from the moment you decided this marriage wasn't working. I didn't say it wasn't working, Diane. She was quiet. Is that what you want? I asked, to end this long silence. I don't know what I want, she said. I think I've been so focused on managing the outcome that I stopped asking myself what I actually wanted. Something about that landed differently than I expected, because it was, perhaps for the first time all evening, completely true. Then I think that's where you need to start, I said. Not with lawyers, not with accounts, with that question. We didn't finish the meal, not because it ended badly, but because there was simply nothing left to perform. We drove home separately. She had taken her own car, I noticed. Another small preparation I hadn't registered at the time. I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The house was dark. The garden was quiet, and for the first time in 2 years, I knew exactly where I stood. What followed was not simple. I want to be honest about that, because stories like this sometimes suggest that the moment of confrontation resolves everything, that the truth comes out and things fall neatly into place. They don't, tanked Diane. I spent 3 weeks in a kind of suspended state, living in the same house, navigating each other with a strange, careful courtesy, while both sets of attorneys began the process of full financial disclosure. Everything came to the surface. Her accounts, my business, equity, the property, the pension sheet, been building. All of it laid out in plain language by people whose job is to see numbers without the emotion attached to them. There was a moment, about 2 weeks into the process, when Diane came to find me in the study late at night. I was working, attempting to work. She sat in the chair across from my desk, the chair she used to sit in years ago, when we would talk late into the evening about everything and nothing. I owe you a real apology, she said. Not a managed one, a real one. Put my pen down. The account, the valuation, the attorney. I told myself I was being practical. that I was protecting myself. But I was also, she paused, treating you like an obstacle rather than a person. And that was wrong, regardless of everything else that was wrong. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you were afraid, I said. I know how it feels to be afraid of the conversation you need to have. I've avoided a few of those myself over the years. That doesn't make it no, I agreed. It doesn't. But it makes it human. We talked for 2 hours that night, not about the attorneys or the accounts, but the agreement she'd never asked me to sign, about the marriage, about where it had gone quiet and when, about the things we'd each let slide because addressing them felt harder than absorbing them, about the pregnancy we'd lost in year 2, in the conversation we'd never